Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Let's open up a new can of worms this week with Build to Rent Real Estate. My guest is Jim Sheils. He's a partner in Southern Impression Homes, a longtime real estate investor, and someone who now focuses primarily on Build to Rent. And we're going to talk about creating a passive income playbook with Build to Rent, and we go all through it, why it satisfies what his investors are looking for and what the market is looking for. Let's get to it. This is episode 181 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Jim Sheils. Jim is a real estate investor, best-selling author, and family leader. He's also a partner at Southern Impression Homes. They do a lot of build to rent there, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about. He's also a co-owner of 18 Summers, which provides family education services. And he's fused these two in his books, The Passive Income Playbook, Leverage Build to Rent Real Estate to Buy Back Your Time and Create a Legendary Family Life. Jim, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was funny. We were just connecting before the call on our locations. We're kind of trading locations. But thinking back, because we were talking about where you grew up, when was the first time that you found yourself interested in real estate?
You know, it first became an interest of mine after I had graduated college in Pennsylvania, left the Northeast and moved to California. I took a sales job out there and it fell through. It was miserable. And I went on to this entrepreneurial pursuit, reading everything. Yeah. This biz op to this franchise to that. And I kept coming back to real estate. There were a few different books that I read, and it just made sense to me. The tangibility, where you and I were hop, skip, and a jump from Wall Street. I never liked that world. I didn't understand it. Real estate just made sense. The leverage, the levers you could pull, and then just seeing some of the case studies that what people were able to do looking with real estate long term. I literally, from just post-college, when I became a good student, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, that's when I found real estate. And it was by accident, but it kept coming back to me like, this is interesting. Real estate investing, very interesting. And so it just kept kind of presenting itself to me in different readings.
Yeah, the tangibility really resonates with me because growing up, I was presented, stocks and real estates as options that's what my dad did. And I was looking at stocks and I really had no control over it. But real estate, the tangibility, you can see it, touch it, improve it. And that really, I guess, made me think differently about it. How did you use that knowledge when you started to lock in on real estate to eventually get you into the business?
Yeah, people say to me, and I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on my education, mastermind groups. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made. Yeah. And people said, well, what's the best real estate class you ever took? I said, that's easy, 432 North M Street, by far. Lombard, California, the first fixer-upper, don't want her, 3-family home that I bought. Yeah. And I'll never forget, I made an offer. They were asking $150,000. And I offered $152,500 with $2,500 in closing costs. So I gave them full price, but I asked them to do it. Now I had done comps and I knew it was worth like $180,000, $190,000. Yeah. And it was a probate sale that an agent had just listed, don't want her. But still, I remember I offered full price to get some closing costs back. And Jonathan, I'm staying in my rental property in Santa Barbara, California, which is right down the road. Yeah. And I was hyperventilating. Yeah. And that had been accepted. It was the worst news I ever got.
That was the first question I was going to ask you as a follow-up. Did you have an oh crap moment? Because it's so funny. Everyone wants to get into the game. But then when you get that first acceptance, you're like, wait, what did I just do? I'm going to collapse my whole life. Yes. What did you do to get past that? Because I know obviously you did.
I was doing a lot of that reading, luckily, and just a lot of people were saying you're going to feel the fear, but do it anyway. Don't get analysis paralysis. And I talk about that. Do your basic numbers, and sooner or later, you are going to have to take some sort of educated risk. Yeah. And at that age, I literally just had to Dr. Phil myself and say, you are young.
Yeah.
You have no dependents. Now is the time to starve yourself. It will not end your life if it does not go well. Take the risk. And the numbers that you were taught to follow and look for, this was a square peg in a square hole. You know what I mean? It matched up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that comes from, building the confidence in yourself, either through business or knowing like, hey, look, after college, that's when I'm going to start to do my real education. You go back, look at your numbers and like, they work,
Yes.
they work. And I like what you said. I think having that knowledge that what's the worst thing that can happen is really that the deal doesn't go well. But as we were talking about the tangibility of real estate, it can't really go that bad. You're still going to own the land. There's still going to be a structure on it. If there's fire, you have insurance. So as we leverage like real estate versus other things, not that much can go wrong if you're really not pulled into some crazy like scheme. Am I right about this?
Oh, absolutely. And especially when you get just a solid knowledge base. And I'm not talking you have to have a master's degree, just some strong fundamentals of what to look for in the few main components that you have to check the boxes on. And once you do that, yeah, like you said, Jonathan, history is with you. The odds are with you. And you will never, ever, and we were talking about other business, there's nothing you can do that's going to grow your wealth that doesn't have some sort of risk. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and you talked about masterminds before and the importance that they played for you. Didn't you find that over time, the more that you matched your knowledge with masterminds, which is basically real life interactions with other investors who've done it, you keep getting more confident and more confident as you go. So those decisions that were confusing for us in the beginning, you're like, well, Bob and Tommy did that, and why would they have no skin in the game? They're just going to tell me the truth. Has that helped you all the way up until where you are now?
Yes. I mean, having mentors and then even peers that weren't involved in my business, but seemed committed to helping me achieve better in it, and I would try to do the same as a good mastermind member. You just got a different perspective. You got called out on things you didn't want to. You got encouraged on things that you were discouraging yourself about unfairly. And so, yeah, it's been a course correction, and I've always said you ultimately have the final decision, but to have outside perspectives to help form better decisions, it's been huge for me.
Yeah, and big difference if you're with somebody that you know, but you're both interested in a property and they're saying, no, I don't think this one's for you. The basement's a little janky, as opposed to you're in a mastermind with someone who lives in Iowa, doesn't invest in your area, and they start calling you out in your numbers. You have a separation there that can really help you provide. There's always ego, that plays a role. But once you can see it clear, you're like, well, there's no reason for them to lie to me. And that makes the relationship stronger over time, which helps you and your confidence grow in that group as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have zero regrets of the money I spent on mastermind and specialized education. It made all the difference for me. If I could go back, and again, which was more important, college or these specialized classes I took afterwards, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm really glad that I actually became a very dedicated student, Jonathan, after I didn't get grades anymore. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I was a very smart kid who flunked out of his first college and then went to a second college, got straight A's because I was already 2 years in, so I could choose the classes I want. Once you leave college, now you're choosing your own path, and you even have more motivation to make it because you're like, hey, I'm actually interested in this. They're not forcing me to take this class. I wanted to get your take, though, on just in general on masterminds, because one thing that I've always said is no matter what the kind of the funnel that gets you into a mastermind or coaching program, I find like a lot of people look for the mistake in the program when it's really user error. The people who fail in a mastermind are just not connecting with the people around them, because you could pay whatever you want, and I doubt you'd be overpaying for a mastermind if all you did was talk to all the people who had the exact same skin in the game as you and discount whether there was even materials available. How do you feel about that?
Most people that I've encountered will go about it with two trains of thought. They'll either be looking for perfection or progress. I've never gone into a mastermind thinking, I'm going to come out of this perfect. It's going to polish me up to it. It's going to have all of the secrets of everything. I've just never thought that. I said, this is going to progress me to the next level, to work on the things that I'm struggling with. And I have one or two main things that I would want to be hitting on. It's where some people go into it with expectation of perfection. And like you said, they might have tons of results, but this one thing didn't work. And so they're almost looking for an excuse or an alibi. This is actually, and this is kind of a side note, I will never pay for another person to go to a mastermind group again. When I first started to come into wealth, Jonathan, and doing pretty well, my excitement was very pure, but it was misguided, where I would pay $5,000 to go to a mentoring group or a mastermind group, very excited. And then there were other people I would say, hey, I'll pay for you to go, just go. They would go to the same mastermind as me, a different class.
Yeah.
And they'd come back kind of like we were saying, oh, well, it's okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess I got something. And I came back with it super excited, things that I put into work. And that was a big lesson to me, where people complain about having skin in the game or having to pay for specialized classes. I was saving my money to go to these classes. So I was ready. I was focused. I was going to make the most. And when you just kind of flip the bill for someone, it can really dull the senses or the importance. And it's amazing the difference in experiences that people can have from the same event.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, when you look around the room and everybody there, but for a couple people, spent their own hard-earned money on that, those people are in the same boat. And I've found, and I'm sure this is similar with you, the people, of course, that we spend the most time with, those 5 people, they're going to impact our lives the most. A lot of times these people come from mastermind groups. The mastermind doesn't end when that session ends, or the weekend session or the 6-month session ends. Those people we carry with us for the rest of their lives usually become business partners, JV partners. Have you found that as well, that the progression goes from here into business and then well beyond?
I've made some of my greatest partners and connections through that. Someone referred me a lender that ended up funding dozens of our deals, or introduction to someone who was hosting events that I ended up teaching at for years. A health practitioner, which I think has revolutionized my health. Like, yes, by getting around that, you're getting exposure to different things that can really give a healthy shortcut to success.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to that first 3 family that you risked it on and got it done. How did you progress from there? And how did you kind of come to the realization, like, I think this is the right path. This is going to work?
Well, I remember bought that house for 152. I went in and I did what I was taught. I renovated the units. There were 2 people living in 3 of the units. I kind of moved people around as we were, with one playing the kind of matching, went in, redid the units, had a contractor friend that I paid to help me go out and work on it on nights and weekends. And we got it reappraised, I think, 4 months later, and it appraised for $198,000. And so, what's that? About $46,000 worth of equity. Now, of course, you couldn't cash that in, but at the time, Jonathan, I was making about $65,000 a year in my sales job. I was like, wow, wait a minute.
What did I just make?
I just did this. And the property, it was a classic. So some people, and I think it can go either way. As long as you don't give up, you do your first deal, it doesn't go that well, there's lessons. I did my first deal, it was a home run. Absolutely. Now, I'd followed a little parameters and buy box and things to check off.
Yeah.
It was a home run. And I raised the rents, I think, because they were way below market. They weren't in bad condition. I fixed them up. They went from $700 a unit to $1,000 a unit. This property was cash flowing after all expenses, $800 a month. I just grown this equity, so I hit a home run. So it gave me confidence. And I actually, at 6 months, was able to refinance to a lower rate, because I had at that time, I still tell people this, they're complaining about interest rates. That first one, I had a 720 credit score. I had W-2s. I was at 9.125 on that first one, because I didn't have any real estate experience. It was a multi-unit, so they beat me up. But I got it refied down, and I was able to pull some money out, actually. And I dumped it into my next properties in Bakersfield, California. Yeah. So that's how quick it happened. So it was, again, learning is important. And I went to some really good classes, but the mechanics of going through that first deal were so important that I still leverage off that every day. And so the mechanics of that first deal were so key.
Yeah, and you were talking about raising the rents, and I immediately started to think of a lot of what you do now, which is build to rent, because it really resonates to say like, hey, well, if you want to get somebody's rent up just in general, you have to give them something. It's hard to just say, hey, I'm going to leave the unit in the same crappy condition, but also let's double up your rent. So you kind of knew in the beginning, set this path forward, like, hey, we're going to move you around, which is great when you have 3 units. You go downstairs, we'll fix your unit up. We're going to move you back upstairs, but P.S. now it's a lot nicer. Here's the market rents. You're going to get more. Do you ever think of that as a corollary to what you do now, which is build to rent, which I think is really, really smart, because in general, you're going to be putting out products to get the highest rent and everything's done. So you're in the best spot.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a great comparison. I've never thought it that way, but think about it. I had a 3-family house. One of the units was vacant. And the others were rented low, and they had to be because they were not in good condition. This has been a forever landlord, not a very gracious landlord from what I was told. So they have one of the 3 units is just vacant. The others are paying way below market. And like you said, I was able to go in and say, well, what would help it be full and people be happier? Well, they would rather pay more and have a fixed up unit because I was still below what other places were being priced at.
Yeah.
And we did that. And so you're always trying to solve the problems with build to rent. So many client investors, myself, again, that's how we started building our own houses. Well, I like tenants to stay longer. Okay, like you said then, well, what can you give them that's going to want them to stay longer? Yeah. I like less maintenance and repairs. Okay, what can I do around that? And saying I like to have, again, for those 2 things, can I get those 2 results of tenants staying longer and less maintenance and repairs if I'm in tougher, not so great areas? Probably not. So we need to go to better areas. We don't want old fixer-uppers. What if we went new construction? So it's kind of solving the issue at hand the same way I did on that first property. And that's what build to rent has done. We're building new construction where our average tenancy has gone from about 13 months to 3 years. Wow. And our average turn costs, you have a rental property, the people move out, you have to turn the property. Our turn costs, Jonathan, have gone down 70%.
Yeah.
Compared to the old ones that we used to fix up. And I still own some of those, and they can be great. But new construction is a totally different animal. Yeah,
I think when you're either presenting a renovated rental or build to rent, you're just presenting something that someone's inherently going to take better care of. For the bad landlords, like for who you took over for, of course the rents are low, but they also have no feeling of home. So for a renter, there's not really a reason for them to tell you about the mold in the shower because the place is a dump anyway.
Exactly.
When you deliver something as, hey, look, you're not ready to buy yet. We hope you're ready to buy at some point, but hey, here's a premier product that you can rent. That's going to be their first home that they're going to treat much more like home than, like you said, some corporate landlord who doesn't care about them. And I think that set the table for a better landlord-tenant relationship as well, does it not?
Oh, 100%. And we're also able to look at the affordability aspect as well for new construction. We're saying, okay, a single family might not be in their price range, but we can build a duplex in a single family home neighborhood and get them the feeling of their own home with their own backyard, not going into a big apartment building at a affordable rent where they can actually be in these neighborhoods they want to be without overstretching themselves.
Yeah, and a nice duplex fits in very well with the residential neighborhood. I mean, I think people get the wrong idea if they're not familiar with just traditional residential multifamily. Like there's lots of blocks where I am where you have a really sweet 2-family in between. They just looks like a single family.
Exactly.
And then there's no like neighborhood angst because, oh, you're putting multifamily. It's just a duplex, same as a side by side, one on top of the other. I think that's a really important note because you said that one thing that I always have an issue is when people talk about affordable housing, they're really talking about 2 separate things. So there's an affordable housing crisis, which they're talking about in general, but it's a misnomer because they're thinking affordable housing in terms of just lower volume, lower rent. Affordable housing applies to everybody. And what you're saying now is I can produce a premier product, make it more affordable by turning it into a duplex. So that mid-range person who, maybe they do have more money than somebody else, but they still can't buy it or they don't want to buy with a 7%. They can rent a pretty sweet property and maybe they're going to save the money and invest in a different piece of real estate.
Exactly. And I think it's important too. A solid duplex, like you said, does not take down the integrity of the neighborhood. That's why that the counties allow, it to be approved in the first place. You're not building a 4-story apartment building or something in a residential neighborhood. But I think a big misconception, Jonathan, about build to rent is what they see Wall Street Journal talk about, where it's build to rent means you go in and you're building 250 houses in one neighborhood and the whole thing is rentals. Now, to be clear, we build some of those for some of the larger hedge funds and institutions. But what about Main Street? What about individual investors like us? Well, I don't really recommend those. They have their own wallets and their own bigger, buy boxes and returns that they look for and how they do it. But for the smaller investors, I was always taught, go to a neighborhood with a good percentage of homeowners to renters.
Yeah.
And that helps with values. It helps normally with the safety of the neighborhood, all sorts of things. So when we're doing build to rent, yes, we'll build whole neighborhoods for sure, but that's normally for bigger groups. We actually do a lot of what's called infill lots.
Yeah.
We'll go to existing neighborhoods and, and a couple square miles, and we'll buy up all the empty lots in an already existing neighborhood with a high percentage of home ownership, and we'll build our single family homes and duplexes in there. Yeah. So now you're getting that safety score of homeowners and renters, a good ratio. I don't like to go all investor-owned neighborhoods. It's just been something I was taught by those first mentors and those first mastermind groups. And so build to rent doesn't have to be whole neighborhoods of just all rentals. It can actually be strategically placed, which we do a lot of for our individual investors.
Yeah, it's really smart. And I think sometimes people in the neighborhoods don't really understand what's happening. You have some people, I don't want them to build new homes. Why? We're just about to raise your value 10% in 5 months. And the more that you explain that and they understand, actually, that product looks pretty nice. That's nicer than my house. Yeah, you can trade up if you want. These are neighborhood development things that people, again, in a confusing sense, will call gentrification, but they're open lots. Yeah. By increasing the value of the neighborhood, you're helping every person on the block who maybe hasn't improved their home. They're still going to go up a little bit. And I think that helps the overall kind of scale. Much better than having a vacant lot. Something's going to get built there, or it's going to become just like a dump site, where people are leaving garbage. So let's have another nice home. I mean, I live in New Jersey, the densest state. There's homes everywhere. But when you see a lot, you're like, why isn't someone doing something with that? Somebody wants to live on the block.
Yep, exactly. And so that's why we've definitely in certain areas, like I can think of Palm Coast, just down the road from where I live, the value rises that we've created in these neighborhoods. Yeah. And the people are thrilled. And again, there's a lot of personal homeowners that have benefited from that. And then we've even had some investors, they bought maybe 5-7 years ago with us, and they're like, hey, I'm going to sell one of my rentals. Well, who do they end up selling to? Usually not another investor, to a first-time home buyer who says, hey, I want to live in one side and rent the other, or hey, I'm going to buy a single-family home. And so you're only going to have that exit strategy to sell to a homeowner if you're in homeowner quality neighborhoods. Right. And so that's why we like to go to a little better neighborhood, because that helps everybody involved.
Yeah. And I mean, that's your buy box. You guys, I think it's really important for everybody, no matter where they're at in their real estate investing cycle, to figure out what their buy box is and try to stick to it until they see an avenue where like, hey, maybe we can expand. But as you were saying before, if you take that same product and you put it in maybe like a D+ area, it's not going to work. Because the same things that you're looking for aren't available there. You're going to be overvalued on the block. When somebody renovates and now is $300,000 in their mind over the rest of the block, that's not a good scale.
No,
you want to rise them together. Like, you wouldn't build like a 4,000 square foot home on a block where all the homes are like 1,800 square foot. It would stand out like a sore thumb.
Exactly. And what we found is, look, it's very hard to get a great tenant in a bad area. In any way you look at it. Yeah. And it's also very hard to get someone to, if your exit strategy is actually you buy a property, you're renting it, and let's say down the road you want to be able to sell it to either an investor or to a homeowner. Well, if you're in a neighborhood that's all investor owned, it's very hard to find someone who wants to actually buy their property in that neighborhood. So you're just cutting out 50% of your potential resale strategy. Yeah. So we like to go to areas, Jonathan, this is very simple, but it was taught in my first year in real estate. I like to build in areas where I can walk down the street at 9 o'clock on a Friday night and not be concerned.
Yeah.
So that's just below the median where we focus. And that might seem simplistic, but it really has worked. And that simple code has helped us get a lot of better traction for us and our investors following that.
Yeah, I think it's you diagnosing who your end game avatar is, either for an investor who wants to pick up this property, their future home buyer, or the renter. They're all looking for the same thing. They're looking for something that's going to be, if they're buying new, they're looking for something that's going to be a little bit safer because the house is going to be safer. There's no, 13 to 25 years of wear and tear on it. So considering the neighborhood is another perk. It's just, hey, the schools are rated higher in this neighborhood. That's going to help you later. In 5 years, that's really going to be a turnaround. And it's interesting because those initial renters who we were talking about, they might become your end buyer in the 5 years for that product. Who's like, hey, I really enjoyed renting in this situation. Now I want to do it myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like it. Hey, it's Jonathan. This is your episode interlude. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Jim Sheils as we go deep on build to rent. It's pretty interesting, right? I have one thing to remind you in the middle. We're finally now at episode 181 and into the future. We are bringing on advertisers, partners to the podcast. So if you're interested in that and you have a company that's real estate related, and I know of it, we do want to work with companies that fit our mission, the mindful approach to real estate investing. Just send us an email through the site at zenandtheartofrealestateinvesting.com and we'll send you the prospectus. Let's get back to Jim. So specific to Florida, because are you doing all of these build to rents in Florida?
We're in 12 different markets in Florida. You won't find us in Tampa, you won't find us in Orlando, and you won't find us in Miami. And being, a Jersey guy like you, I'd say, well, what else is in Florida, right? And so, but when you're building new construction properties and wanting to go to stronger areas, like for all the reasons we just said, the land in those areas is just too expensive. And the buy-in price is just too expensive. Or look, I love visiting those markets. I have family in all those markets. But for the investor mindset and fundamentals, we go to second-tier markets where there is population growth, economic growth, desirability, healthy supply and demand. But most importantly, there's affordability. The affordability index, most of the markets we build in is, like Jacksonville compared to Miami. Well, the median sales price is 50% less in Jacksonville.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so that allows you to get cash flow right off the bat. And also, I always like to say to people, which market do you think has more room for equity growth? Because I don't depend on equity growth, but I like to get in its way.
It's nice.
And so that's one of the key things. So we're in all second tier markets, about 12 of them in Florida. We have moved into Texas and we'll be going to Tennessee mid next year. We're very serious in our parameters of only going to places with those 5 factors: economic growth, population growth, a good affordability index, something desirable, wanting people to live there, and healthy supply and demand. Coupled with that, landlord laws. We're very serious about, we have to have good landlord laws. There's been areas like we were in Atlanta building for a long time. We will not go back there. Atlanta during the pandemic, the average eviction went from about 45 days to 14 months.
Yeah.
We just can't put our investors in that type of situation. So we do watch landlord laws closely, Jonathan, for our rental property.
Yeah, and specific to Florida and Texas, of course, because that's where insurance costs have gone up generally the most. Those are hugely advantageous to be doing build to rent because your build is going to have much better insurance rates than traditional already built homes, drastically, sometimes like a 2x or more. And that's a big advantage to your investors too, if they're weighing the products and saying like, hey, well, I can spend the most here, but my insurance costs are really locked here because I have a builder's warranty.
Absolutely. And you see with the insurance companies are all about risk. So I laugh when people say you can't get insurance for properties in Florida. I kind of giggle. That's a very blanketed statement. I say, for which properties? Because most investors here know if you buy a property that was built 2004 or newer, the laws changed in 2004 because a big hurricane hit Southwest Florida. And they're like, okay, timeout. We got to build. You're not allowed to build at 2 feet above sea level. You got to go 13, 14 feet, stronger fasteners, stronger structural design. And they've held up well in hurricanes when you have those things. When you go with new construction, like my house that I'm here at now, it was built in 2004. I'm one off the ocean. It's only 10 houses wide from ocean to intercoastal. There's a few properties down towards the intercoastal that are from 1955, a third of the size of my house, if that. Their insurance is 5x my insurance, 5x.
Yeah,
because of the things I just sent about. So always shop around, like you said, new construction, especially in an area like Florida, 2004 or newer. You do the insurance quotes and you're going to be saying, wow, that is a huge difference. And it can be the difference between your cash flow or your negative cash flow.
Yeah, and just overall, from an investor's point of view, we touched on this a little bit at the beginning. I mean, if you're looking at a product and you have money and not a lot of time, buying something that's already is brand new is really going to help you scale. You're going to have no capex. You don't have to do a calculation to see how much you're going to have to spend because you have the warranty. It's just a smarter deal, especially for people who have less time to really worry about it. And you guys integrate the management into the build to rent program as well, I believe, which helps people kind of walk in. But it's not necessarily turnkey, because turnkey is a different model. It's similar, but that's like something that I see different. This is intentional build to rent, where you're really setting up the process for them to go from the start and keep going.
Yeah, turnkey. I mean, the term turnkey was normally, and it started just post 2008, finding foreclosed properties, fixing them up, renting them out, and either, people like me own real estate companies. We either keep them for ourselves or on-sell them to investors and manage them for them. And look, it helped create a lot of wealth for me and other investors, but you're always trying to improve. And I don't like headaches. With old 1950s, 60s houses, there are certain things you cannot see. Even if you did new roof, heating, cooling, plumbing, updated kitchens, bath, electric.
Yeah.
What we learned, Jonathan, was something called a 3-year curse. After 3 years, and it didn't matter, and again, I own older houses, but I know that I have to, prepare for that. After 3 years, the maintenance repairs just went up. And they seem to have more turnover. There are more surprises. What is with this sewer main? Oh, I didn't see that fascia wood was rotted off. Or
and no builder's warranty on a renovation that somebody
did,
for a little bit.
Q10 warranty on that. So they serve a purpose, but there's more turnover. There's more maintenance repairs that you cannot see. And it doesn't matter if you do complete redos. We call it the 3-year curse. By 3 years, you just have to start estimating more than what you do the new construction. Now doing the new construction 10 years, the 3-year curse still hasn't set in 10 years later.
Yeah.
And so you're starting from a different structural point, which makes all the difference. And that's something that we've been very grateful for, going from the old turnkey model to new construction.
Yeah, in terms of investor expectations, if they're going to buy something that's built to rent, what are they looking at in terms of buy price to rent price? Because of course there's a traditional 1% rule that a lot of people use, but as time's gone by and rates have gone up, it's not as realistic. Is there a number that you guys have in your head when you're doing build to rent, where you're trying to make sure the rents are in a certain percentage, comparative to the sale price?
Yeah, our prices range from about $260 to about $985, and that's for a starter single family home, right up through our duplexes to quads in some of the nicest areas in Jacksonville for $985. Our numbers, we do not try to hit the 1% rule. That's just not something we do.
I don't think it's reasonable right now. In the Midwest, you can do it, but it's not reasonable in bigger markets.
And we used to hit the 1% rule. And I talk about this in my book. We used to hit the 1% rule on the fixer-uppers we were doing in the post-foreclosure days, the post-2008 days. What I found, and I owned a lot of these, is the amount of excessive, compared to our new construction model, of turnover and unexpected maintenance and repairs and turn costs. That extra 1+% would get eaten up and then some.
Yeah, I agree.
And it only got worse when you owned, 100, 150, 200, which I got to personally. And that can be very detrimental to growth and stress and all the things you were hoping the properties would do, and they don't.
Yeah.
So that's just something, word for the wise. I will always, when people say to me, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned? Because it's very cool when I share my bios. Oh, he's done, over 1,000 rehabs and this and that. And I say, I would have done less of better quality.
Yeah.
So who was the smart one? The guy who did less than me and bought better quality properties and wasn't running around doing all these extra things, or me? And I'd say the guy who did less, do less of better quality. So I will always sacrifice some cash flow up front, like the 1% rule, to get a new construction in a better area that's poised for better growth. And that's shown to work for me. That's something I got real serious about 10 years. I'm 25 years into my career. About 10 years ago, I'm going to own less of better quality.
Yeah.
And today I own way less properties than at my height, but I have more cash flow and more equity than I ever have. So what does that tell you?
Exactly. It goes to something that I talk about a lot, the kind of current obsession with people counting how many doors they have. But it's like, okay, so would you rather own 10 doors that all cash flow a low amount, or would you rather just have one nice door that cash flows the exact? It's a no-brainer.
Yep.
one door is one furnace and one hot water heater. So you'd rather have 10 that equal that, so you can say you have 10, but then when each hot water heater breaks, you're out 10x. I mean, it's kind of silly, the mentality. And I don't know if social media has played into it, but you've been in it a long time like me. Have you seen that? Like, look, if you've been around the game for a long time, you kind of understand what the metrics are and what you're trying to provide. And personally, me, I can't speak for you, but I'm not really looking for the flashy thing anymore. I want nice, solid, boring. A lot of people say, boring real estate's awesome. Like, let's get it. Brand new build, walk in, have a nice renter. They stay for 3 years. Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, boring is good. Again, a mentor of mine said, if you want excitement, go jump out of an airplane for fun.
Yeah.
Go skydiving. It should be with it's boring. It's just kind of cranking along. It's doing its thing. I've had way too much quote unquote excitement with older fixer upper properties with lots of turnovers and tougher neighborhoods that I knew.
Yeah.
It's just not fun. So yeah, boring is good. Again, you're not getting into real estate. At least most of the people that we've interviewed are success stories, and we have over 1,000 active clients. The ones that have done the best, they were not getting into real estate to create a second or third job.
Yeah, exactly.
They were getting it to buy back their time, to have time with the things that they enjoy doing, with the people they love. And so this is where it makes you reassess. Like you said, there was old programming, Jonathan, of when I went into it, and I think it was for good reason, to get people to take action. That's important. If you get into the 100 house club, man, well, I did that. And then I 2X'd that almost, but I didn't stop to think about the quality. And it matched up with the example you just said of the 10-to-1. And I'm going, I just went through a whole lot of crazy work that I could have done a lot less and gotten better results.
Yeah.
And so that's something I always forewarn people. And it should be an encouragement. You don't need as much as you might be thinking to actually, with some wind at your back and the market fundamentals going a few years down the road, to have something of real tangibility and worth working for you day in and day out.
Yeah, and it really goes to the build to rent philosophy overall, just in terms of value. Because do you want 10 old homes that you can all get for 100,000, so you can say you have 10 doors? You want a home for 1 million that's going to cash flow more, is completely brand new and have no issues, where you can have an issue on each house each month 10 times. It's just the thing that people are focused on the wrong thing, because I think this short-term thought is really pervasive in real estate investing. And for what people are, I want to earn income like right away. Okay, well then, you're going to buy in a D+D neighborhood, you're going to get income, but you're going to get just as many headaches with that. This is really a solution to that problem, again, for investors who are looking for something that's not necessarily passive, but much more passive than trying to do a flip themselves, as we both know.
Oh, absolutely. Our goal is 2 hours a month.
Yeah,
2 hours a month. If you want to build a portfolio with us just to slate 2 hours a month, you might not have to use all that. If you're leveraging into our system and our management, but to slate 2 hours a month. If you go out and buy the types of properties we're talking about, even if you have a manager, you will get pulled in on more things. You have to, because the odds are there's more turnover, there's more issues, there's more surprise repairs. You're dealing with a different type of tenant. So if your goal is more anonymity and buying back time, then again, think about results. Think about quality over quantity, because it can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is, this podcast about the mindful approach to real estate investing. And one of the parts of your book and the title is Buy Back Your Time and Create a Legendary Family Life. That really resonates with me, because I think, as you were saying, these are people who are buying in to create time freedom. But these new people are always out there thinking that they're chasing financial freedom. And what the money is relative to where you live. What they're chasing is time freedom. And this is part of what you're trying to organize for other people, to say hey, you can buy your time back, because now you have somewhat passive income, which I do think you need to have some responsibility for. If you outsource everything, you'll never know what's going on long term. But is this all part of your kind of, generational plan? Hey, real estate's great. I found it by going to college and then thinking, hey, that property looks good, but I want that to be really a life thing. And I think of this life architecture as really important in what you're doing.
Yeah. And also, I don't want my children, I'd like to pass properties down to my kids, as long as they're we align on values. I have a rule. I don't fund addiction. If they ever went down that road, I would never fund addiction. So they can't do that. I have certain parameters and family rules, but I'd like to see, and all of them look on the right track, that they'll take over properties of mine.
Yeah,
I
same.
don't really want to leave them with properties with a lot of problems in problem areas. That seems pretty unkind of me.
Yeah.
So, and if we're saying we're looking for generational wealth, well, it's hard to look at generational wealth if you have a property that's fallen apart every 2 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just if you're thinking long term with your properties, then think, can this property actually sustain long term? Or is it just a constant grind?
Yeah. And I mean, again, great thing about real estate, which we touched on in the beginning, the tangibility. If you have 10 properties and 2 are dogs that you don't want to send, just sell them. Oh, I don't want to sell it at a loss. Why? Like
First
you're
loss,
making a horse collar for your kids, like sell it, but invest your tiny loss into something else that's going to make more money. I mean,
yeah,
real
first,
estate's tradable.
it's the funny thing. And again, first loss is best loss is a Warren Buffett saying.
Yeah.
And what a lot of us do, and I've even looked at it, and I've made lots of mistakes. Like I said, I left Bakersfield, California, came to Jacksonville, and I bought properties that I thought were better off and in better areas than they were. And just they bled me for years. Yeah. And what I would actually do, and this is something where you just really gave people a lot of very, very good direction. And that one thing of, you've got bad properties, sell them. What we normally do, and which is just insane, and I did this, you sell a really good property to pay for the losses of the bad property, and you hold on to the bad property and say, well, it's going to lose money.
I want to get them to profitability. Why?
Yeah. Cut the losers, ride the winners.
Yeah.
And that's something I've had to learn. Okay, this property, it's just like these ones I bought, these are just not working. I'm going to take a loss. Why the heck did I sell these good properties that were performing to pay for these ones that continue to bleed? If you make a wrong mistake on a property, first loss is best loss. Get out of it, move forward, especially on these types of properties, and get into higher quality things that you can look long term with. Don't ever sell a good property to pay for a bad property.
Yeah, I mean, the down payment's there for a reason. You're going to recoup the down payment. Okay, you didn't make $100,000. Maybe you lost $11,000. Big deal. That'll help you on your taxes anyway. Just get moving, repurpose the money into something else. I think just it's an ego thing a lot of the times. And I know you know this, especially with the past. You're buying back your time. You have to understand where ego plays a role and what I'm, depriving myself of time with my family because, I got to work this and I got to work this side business. I got to make these 39 bad rental properties in D+ areas work. Now you have 2 jobs. You have no time for your family because you didn't do it the way that you thought. Do you think that when you bought those properties, though, in Jacksonville, the ones that you probably now know, like, oh, those weren't the right properties to buy, do you know why you bought them? Were you looking to try to take more action? Because I think that's something that people suffer from as well.
Yeah, there's the analysis paralysis, and then there's the taking action. And again, I had been, this was terrible advice. Just buy more houses.
Yeah.
That's what one educator went, just buy more houses. You want less risk, own more houses. That was a really half qualified advice. And so I just thought, okay, if I own more houses and these properties are cheap still, and it's 04, 05, and you couldn't find anything cheap in a coastal, city at that time. And I thought I was getting into the right type of properties. They had more maintenance and repairs than I knew, more repairs, tougher neighborhoods than I knew, more turnover than I expected for. The 1% rule, it was there. And did it get gobbled up and then some?
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's 1% at the beginning.
Yes. And then it starts to get eaten sideways. And what I found is, if I sacrifice some cash flow up front into better quality, better neighborhoods, I'm going to take less, let's say, cash flow up front. But what I found is if I'm getting in and the cycles do what's done for history, within a few years, I'll be kind of like, yes, there'll be growing. I won't be that involved. But if I do it with the other properties that I got into, by a few years in, you're like, I'm exhausted. And I got to keep funding this and that. And it's just not worth it. And it's not a great recipe for long-term wealth, which is why a lot of us go into this.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight and just go back because I want to make sure that people don't miss it. What you said was so important. That it really happens that people will sell their best property because it's worth the most and the most attractive to subsidize and pay for their worst properties, which they don't want to give up. Instead of just selling their worst properties, taking the loss and saying like, hey, let me get another of these one that's crushing it. That happens all the time. I'm sure you know people. I know people who've done it. I've probably done it myself at some point in my career just because I was just trying to, you just feel like you don't want to let go of them because you made a mistake. Like, what's the big deal? You made a mistake. Trade it.
Well, you make it a mistake and you continue to live with it, which means you know there's only so much energy you have in your tank.
Yeah.
You continue to give mental energy, time energy to that fixer-upper, pain in the rear property. It's not going anywhere. It's continuing to lose. When I finally just said enough and started to sell them either at a loss or right at par, I mean, the amount of creativity and initiative that I bought back was incredible. And it definitely was like, okay, it made me think, how can I do this better? And that's how new construction really started to come onto the forefront.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, are all you do now is new construction, built
Only
to
new
rent?
construction.
Yeah.
It'll be very, very rare, Jonathan, for me to rehab a property. Again, I'm not against it. It got me going. But for the model that we stick to, especially working with clients, because what I'll do for myself, and again, still, I don't like fixing up properties anymore. It's very rare. But when you are working for a client, like our client, we have over 1,000 clients, they're busy. They have successful practices or careers or businesses. They're depending on us for real estate to not drag them, to not create a second or third job, and yes, get them good returns. But there's a balance of those things. If I said, look, I can get you the 2% rule, but you're going to need to, instead of be 2 hours a month, I need you 28 hours a month to do properties. That's not what they want. So the new construction has really, clearly been the better answer for how the people I work with. And it's very rare that I'm going to rehab a property, and definitely not with clients anymore.
Yeah, and from a quality control standpoint, it's like once you're a new build, new con person, like all those decisions are yours. You're building from the ground up yourself. If you go and take over somebody else's foundation, you really don't have the same confidence that you have in your own processes. So you're taking on somebody else's problem. But as we were saying before, it could be somewhere that you may not find out, and then that could affect your reputation in terms of what you're doing. So by staying in the lane with the new con, barring like something that's a complete teardown option, seems like a great idea to me. I think too many people try to do too many things and then realize, well, again, I'm the master of none at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. I wanted to get one thing from you because we were talking about advice that you've learned, but as someone who's flipped, or renovated thousands of homes, for somebody right now in this economic environment who is new and wants to get into flipping, what's a piece of advice that you would give them? Because I'm very leery or just, I guess, worried for new flippers now because I just don't think they know what they're doing. Construction cost is high. Contractor turnover is extremely high. I worry for them. What advice would you have if they really want to do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Remember, there is a difference between entertainment and effectiveness. And the TV shows are designed to make you want to watch them. So struggle, big repairs, setbacks, almost always part of the show.
Hero's
and
journey.
I know from being and from being on the backside of some involvement around those, most of those deals actually lose money.
Oh yeah.
And they're done for entertainment. And so those shows have taught you to take on these big, grandiose rehabs. That's not how I would start out.
Yeah.
The old thing of, and I can't stand carpet now, but it used to be called, look, find something undervalued that just needs paint and carpet.
Yeah.
That was great advice.
That's how I started.
Yeah. And that's what you want to look for. Now, for that said, you will never see in our new construction any carpet.
Yeah.
If I could go back, I could buy a few houses free and clear with the amount I spent on carpet. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Vinyl plank flooring, tile, like that. So anyway, but again, the old paint and carpet adage. Start with a rehab where you're getting a good price. It's ugly. The landscape is crap.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs just a new roof and paint carpet and new cabinets or something like that.
Yeah, appliances.
You're not looking for big structural damage. And you're also, and maybe you have a knack for this, but you don't necessarily want to do a high-end home. You do a high-end home, you're dealing with high-end buyers. And
yeah,
they
exactly.
Might be here, did you know? And also, if you're buying a high-end home, that means you're having a bigger amount of skin in the game. I mean, I encourage people, look for paint and carpets in the hottest part of the market, which is normally priced just below the median.
Yeah.
That's where they're affordable. So you have a bigger pool of buyers. If you get something that's paint and carpet, not a structural disaster, it's easier to clean up. The pennies on the dollar to fix up paint and carpet along with landscape, can add a lot of value, especially if you got into the property right. Try to get into the property right with cosmetic repairs, priced below the medium. Don't start at a high-end one or super tough neighborhood because it's super cheap, that's where you get into trouble. And just remember, if you're like, as you said before, Jonathan, gosh, this is kind of boring. I just changed out the floors and painted and did the landscape.
And I only made $20,000 in 3 months.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
That's what you want. So boring is good. Price below the median is good. Cosmetic repairs opposed to structural are the way to go.
Yeah, when I'm looking, and even when I'm advising new people who want to do it, I'm just looking, as you said, cosmetic to me means everything's in the right spot. The bathrooms are in a good spot. The kitchen layout looks good, like the water, gas, everything's in a good spot. So you don't have to do anything, which also means you're not going to need a lot of permits for direct replacement, which is going to save you time. Make sure you know what you're doing correctly. If you don't have to adjust the structure, maybe a wall, but you need someone, qualified to do that. But I'm just looking for a structure that makes sense. If you have a really, really ugly house and it has an ensuite bath, you're so far ahead of the curve, because that's what's going to play to the end buyer. And like you said, doing the carpet, it's a lipstick flip. It's how I figured out how to do it. My dad taught me growing up, but when I did it myself the first time, I basically painted, recarpeted, added a little paint in every room, and I put in new appliances, and then I lived there. And then a year and a half later, I sold it and I made 25 grand. And I wasn't one of those people who was like, oh, a year and a half for 25 grand, that's not a lot. My salary at the time for the government was 25 grand. So I was like, this is amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
And I think that's the outlook that they need to have. And I think it is really smart. It is tougher to buy, but it depends what market you're in. You can find a lipstick flip somewhere because, as we were saying, for someone like you or a builder or someone who's doing value add, like add a level construction, they're not interested in that. Yeah. So there's a subsection of, you're kind of against home buyers who think they can do a little bit of work, but maybe you know the data better and you understand what you need to do or where you can add a little bit extra that may help you. Yeah, I think these have been great advice for people, and also really an eye-opener for build to rent, because even at episode 181, we haven't really talked a ton about build to rent. So I really appreciate your time. Before we hop off, where's the best place for people to get in touch with you or find out more about build to rent with you?
Yeah, if they want to learn more about our systems, jjplaybook.com is a great start. That's something my wife and I designed. We have a best-selling book out there called the Passive Income Playbook, and it's all about build to rent real estate. That's a great spot. You can get some of the free downloads right from there. It'll talk about our building company, Southern Impression Homes, where we've helped over 1,000 investors build successful portfolios in the build-to-rent space here in Florida.
Yeah, awesome. They can reach you through that on the JJ Playbook?
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we've swapped locations in some ways, but it was great talking to you. I got a lot out of the episode myself, so I appreciate your time.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
All right. That was Jim Sheils. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end to find out what episode is coming up next. That's right. I can't say who this week because I got great feedback from my solo episode on 172, so I'm at it again. Next episode, it's just me, and it's about why analysis paralysis isn't real, and if you think it is, I'm going to explain to you how to overcome it. I personally don't think that it's real. You're going to find out all of my ideas around that next episode. Stay tuned, and I'll see you then.